Welcome to the Innovative Pedagogy Podcast, where we inquire with the greatest minds in academia, where innovation, creativity, and authenticity meet the best teaching and learning practices for educators all over the world. Most importantly, hoping all those we come in touch with leave inspired and ready to change their world. Here's our host, Chris Garcia.
Welcome to the Innovative Pedagogy Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Garcia, and today I'm honored to welcome our special guest, Becky Keene. Becky is an educator, author, speaker, and change maker whose passion is advocating for education transformation. She believes all learners deserve opportunities to thrive in an unpredictable future and works with schools, organizations, and systems worldwide to champion best practices and educational innovation. She's currently serving as a director of operations for Insight 2 Execution. Becky leads a team focused on game-based learning, esports, and artificial intelligence in education. She's a national board certified teacher, ISTE certified educator, Microsoft certified coach, an experienced classroom teacher, and Becky brings more than 20 years of expertise in instructional design and technology integration. In her latest book, AI Optimism, a guide to redefining artificial intelligence in education, she challenges educators to embrace small, purposeful innovations and see AI as a tool for equity, empowerment, and student success. Welcome, Becky. I'm thrilled to dive into this important conversation with you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for that nice intro.
Oh, absolutely. It's an honor to be able to finally have a chance to talk to you. I know we had the opportunity of talking very briefly there at ISTE in San Antonio this past year, but when I saw your book and I saw the word optimism on it also, I was like, okay, this is something that I definitely want to dive into, only because there's a lot of resistance, hesitancy, fear, and around artificial intelligence. And I thought this is a great book, and I had the opportunity of diving in the last few weeks since San Antonio and reading it, and I'm excited to talk about it now. I know we talked a little bit about it before we started the recording, but again, thank you for taking the time to meet and record this episode.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm so glad AI Optimism resonated with you.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope it resonates with many more out there. At the end of it, we'll talk about how anyone can grab a copy of your book and where they can grab it and from there. But let's go ahead and start off with why AI optimism. So your book is entitled AI Optimism. So what inspired you to focus on optimism at a time when AI often generates fear and uncertainty in education?
Well, it's a funny little story, Chris, because that is not where the book started. So I didn't start with that title and then write content to match. I actually had the entire manuscript done in editing, had been through developmental review, and my editor said, "Hey, you really need a title." Like we need to work on the cover. Like I hadn't landed on a title yet, and so I had some great conversations with the editing team and a couple of colleagues, and we kind of brainstormed. And they said, "Well, what do you really want people to know about you and what you believe? And what theme kind of permeates the entire book?" And ultimately, it came down to positivity. And we kind of just threw around that idea of helping people understand that my view that I choose to embrace is to focus on potential more than problems.
Mm.
It doesn't mean I erase the issues. It doesn't mean I don't, hold court to them. I want to be involved in conversations around equity and privacy and data management and plagiarism and like all these important conversations. But I choose at the end of those conversations to focus on what's possible more than the barriers. And so in those conversations, someone kind of made the joke, well, call it that. Call it, being an AI optimist. And
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, we're going with AI optimism. Like that is what the message I want to send to the world. So that's where that came from.
And it's a great title. I mean, we live in 2025 now, and we live in an age where optimism is it's a value and something that a lot of people pretty much need in many facets of their life. So I commend you for sticking to that and to just even being very flexible with like, all right, let's call it AI optimism.
Yeah.
Um, what do you see? And speaking of 2025 and some of the challenges that we've seen just across the globe, education coming back after COVID and whatnot. But what do you see as the most prominent misconception educators have about AI today? And mind you, it's been exposed what since 2023 when ChatGPT kind of first came out to the public. Of course, diving into the history, it's been around a little bit longer than that. But what has been some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen across the country? I also know you've traveled across the world. You've presented in London as well. So maybe the conversations you've had there. So what are the misconceptions you're noticing out there?
Just in general, I think one big misconception is that AI is ruining our kids. By our kids, of course, as teachers, we always reference our class as our kids,
Right, right.
but our students, our learners. And I think that, we went through a phase where it was like, oh, the internet is going to ruin education, and then screens are going to ruin education, and then phones are ruining kids, and then social media is ruining kids. And now we're in this theme that AI is ruining kids. And so I think that again, like anything, has great value as far as the conversation around, hey, let's make sure kids aren't replacing human connection with AI. Let's make sure that kids aren't trusting everything that an AI bot spits out at them. Let's make sure that kids aren't offloading their critical thinking and their enjoyment of the world into an automated tool. Like all of those are very valid concerns. But I also think that if we scapegoat the tools, we kind of in some ways relinquish the opportunity and the responsibility to focus on what kids really need. And I actually just published this week. I didn't even mean to tie this in, but it works with
Yeah,
what I'm
for
talking
sure.
about. I just published a blog post this week on the digital refuge and how kids have been seeking these spaces away from adults where they can play and feel comfortable and kind of maybe push boundaries. And that has happened through gaming, through social media, and is now happening through AI. So, again, the misconception that it's the technology's quote fault is pretty persistent. And I would like to say that I think it's more about how we approach life and humanity that maybe has evolved along with the tools.
No, I completely agree with that. And as you're saying that, the phrase that continuously gets resonated with me is that things are at times, especially with our students that we work with, are more caught than taught. And students watch us as educators, as human beings, and how we respond to technology, to social media, to even political climates and things that are
Right.
happening. And a lot of that will leave an embedded impact on students. So I recently saw a post and actually an article on Edutopia. Somebody wrote something about banning and not using AI at all in the classroom and actually reverting back to traditional methods. And she actually made a strong claim and argument of how it, and why it worked, which it may have worked for her school site and it brought up a lot of positive results. But at the same time, the students that we are working with now, they are the digital they're children of the digital age, and they all they know is the internet, all they know is technology evolving. They don't know what life was like going to Blockbuster and having to get an AOL CD and download the internet, and even if you couldn't afford AOL, they don't know what Juno is and having to get the free
Right.
internet. So to your point, it's about being good human beings and being able to model it well. And that leads me to this next part as well. And when it comes to practical classroom integration, um, and I'm going to ask this, but I'm also going to ask you to just dive a little bit into the theory that Dr. Ruben Puente Dura actually you had the opportunity of forwarding in your book. But that is, how can teachers practically integrate AI tools into their classroom without feeling overwhelmed or losing the human element of teaching? And if you please feel free to elaborate even on the pedagogical side of SAMR if you would like as well.
Right. So I'll back up a little bit to the AI optimism framework, where we start by thinking, and that really is the practical integration of it. We start with these three core principles of praxis, prompting, and privacy,
Hmm.
where we have to do some self-reflection on what do I value. Like the teacher who wrote your Edutopia article, clearly she has strong values of what she's hoping her students will learn and achieve and how they will interact with each other. We all have values of what we think great education might look like, and we infuse that into our classrooms as best we can, even in the face of mandated curriculum and standardized testing and maybe an administrator who's, over opinionated about what you should be doing. Teachers, infuse that. And so when we take a step back and we reflect on what do we believe about education, and then we apply principles of privacy to that, and we care about where student data is going and what kind of tools we're using, not just adopting whatever. And then we think about how powerful we can be as adults, as designers and creators and supporters of student learning. Then we think, okay, what am I trying to do? And when we talk about, like Ethan Mollick says, be the human in the loop, be the Saba Kidway would say, use your kismet. It's like, what's the human involved in this planning conversation around what am I trying to achieve with students?
Mhm.
It's that understanding by design model that was popular 20 years ago.
Right,
It's
right.
not about like, oh, I saw this fun tool, I'm going to try and use it with my kids. Like that is the wrong approach. In my opinion is we should start with what we want to achieve and then think through how much am I going to allow AI to be involved? Maybe it's zero in certain situations.
Right.
Maybe it's at the substitution level where it's like, I'm just trying to make things faster and more efficient. But maybe in a SAMR model, it's all the way to modification where I'm changing the task because now I have this tool that allows me to create a simulation or create a chatbot or make something an adaptive learning path. Like those things are possible. And so you asked for something practical. And what's practical is to stop getting excited about, I call them the sparkly apps
Yeah.
that are like, woo, look what we can do. Like just hang on. Um, and take a step back and think about what they're trying to achieve. And that's really the human element.
Right.
And
Right.
then we decide what tools and fit that meet my strategies and my learners and my school and my accommodations, right? So it's tough because as educators, I used to work in under the instructional technology department for my school district,
Mhm.
and teachers are known for being like, I found this thing, I want it now, like I want to use it tomorrow. And then we've got like these ridiculous district processes where it takes like 9 months to get an app approved.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle, there's probably a scenario where a teacher can be like, I love this. Can I use it, next month? And somebody says, yeah, let's try it out. Because you have purpose. And anyway, I feel like I've just like beaten that to death. But ultimately,
Right.
the best thing we can do is choose tools that are appropriate and meet our needs that solve problems.
No, and that you hit up a very important point when it came and when it comes back down to what is the goal and what is the purpose. And sometimes what's practical is looking at the end result. And I mean, I know we're referring to Grant Wiggins with understanding by design, but like just that is exactly like what are we going to do? What is the outcome and how are we going to get there? And
Mm.
at the same time, even with technology, and a lot of these brand new apps, there are apps that are out there that have actually stood within the test of time, and they're still around, and they're still very powerful, and they've been upgraded. Shout out to Padlet, but but I'm
Major upgrades in the last
yes,
year.
some
Yeah.
major upgrades, and
Yeah.
they've taken the opportunity also. But I'm thinking of when you think of innovation, and you think of even technology and just different. I'm thinking of automobiles right now, and I'm thinking right now like I've heard my grandparents say like they don't make them like they used to, and I'm like, you know what, you're right. I see some of these old classics out there, and they are still riding strong, and people trust them. But at the same time, I feel like it can also be applied to some of the best practices and some of the technology that's still out there. Again, I mentioned one of them that's it's still going out there strong and whatnot, but it goes back down to that purpose. And that leads me to this next part, just to kind of tag on with classroom integration, and that is, do you have any examples of where you've seen AI help close a learning gap or provide access that maybe wasn't possible before?
Yes, I have many. One that I will choose to share right now is because I'm not in a classroom full time anymore. I get to work with kids and work with schools and listen to teachers certainly, but I want to give that as a caveat. I'm not in a classroom full time. Um, I volunteer anyway, so I try to stay as relevant as I can. But and a lot of my stories come from volunteerism, neighbor kids, my own children, working in my kids' schools. So this particular story is a neighbor of mine. And she is 7 and she's just been taking her sweet time figuring out reading and phonics, right? And she's just had some challenges there. And so she's been in a special reading group at school, right? Where she's gotten, additional instruction time. And they sent her home with some reading worksheets to do at home, some extra
Mhm.
practice. And I have a master's in literacy, and I'm certainly not the biggest expert in the whole planet, but I have a love of literacy. Um, and my degree is actually in early elementary literacy. And
Nice.
so I was kind of heartbroken when she came home with this like worksheet packet of practice because I know that that's not going to be interesting to practice. So she was at my house hanging out, right? Like we're close with her family, and I got her set up with Microsoft's Reading Coach app on my iPad.
Hmm.
And there's other apps that do something similar, like Story Wizard is one if you're not wanting to use a Microsoft tool. So pick a tool that does this same thing. But basically, she was able to construct a little story with AI with her own ideas, right? There, she chose like a dog and a cabin, and it was summer, like she got to choose some things. And then it generated this story that was primer, pre-primer, like real young level. And she was able to read maybe 80% of it. Now, the words that she couldn't get, because it's in this app, she was able to touch and listen to the word being read aloud. And often she would go, "Oh, I know that word," because her expressive vocabulary is totally on grade level. It's,
Right. Right.
her reading that's struggling. So that support and the picture dictionary that's built in allowed her to feel like she was doing the reading, right? And she was so excited about it. And not only was she excited, she was successful. Like she was getting that instant feedback that wouldn't have happened if she was sitting doing the paper worksheets. In addition to that, so we, had fun. She got to earn a point. She saw her soul streak. There's those extrinsic rewards built in. The next time she was over, a couple days later, she came in and said, "Hey, can I do that reading practice thing again?" And I was like, "Sure." So I gave her her iPad and we set a timer. She had 10 minutes, whatever. Now, I really, really doubt that she would have come in and been like, "Hey, can I do one of those reading worksheets?" Like, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And so the simple fact that this AI tool gave a kid motivation and interest and also real-time support in reading is incredibly impactful. And then if you
Right.
multiply that by an entire class of kids who, and I'm 100%. Some people will stretch this and be like, "Oh, she doesn't like books. Oh my gosh, come over to my house." Big fan, right? I
Yeah.
thousands of books floating around, literally. But time and a place. Like she's not ready to sit down with Amelia Bedelia. She needs that like instant help motivation to get going so that she has the skills to enjoy a physical book because she's not there yet and she's too old to enjoy Bob books because she knows too much in her head, right? She's in that gap. So just one story in many of how these tools, I think when teachers say I'm not going to use AI, they've forgotten about stories like that one and what it could be doing for their students.
And I just love the fact that you mentioned intrinsic motivation because that right there, I remember taking a class back in 2011 at USD when I was getting my master's and my teaching credential. And the book was entitled Mirrors of the Mind by my professor, Naroki Inoue. And the entire class was focused on extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
Mm,
And we went through this entire case study, research analysis, and theoretical frameworks. We were talking about what does intrinsic motivation look like. Now, I know you'll understand this language, and this is not part of this podcast when it comes to AI, but one of the things that I've seen, and probably guarantee that you've seen, is like when esports is around, intrinsic motivation
Mm.
is like past the roof.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the fact of students being able like, okay, using that, and I, I've talked to so many educators, and I keep telling them like, I think we've nailed it. We've nailed it. There's as far as being able to finally integrate video games into curriculum and being
Hmm.
able to have that as an intrinsic form of motivation where it impacts the entire school culture and school attendance and
Yeah.
behavior and everything. But I would agree with you. I believe AI can do the exact same thing. And you just shared a practical story of somebody that was motivated for the very fact of being able to use something that was like intrinsically motivating them.
Hmm. Yeah. And you and I totally agree on esports. So like we could have a whole separate podcast on, yeah, on the value of esports.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had several with a lot of amazing people out there. Maybe we will later on in the future. Maybe part two will be esports, but, and a lot of case studies out there. But I will say, and if those are like, well, what's one of them? Actually, just look up attendance rates for schools and look up the attendance days that schools have esports and the days that they don't and see if there's a big impact. That's one little
Mm.
nugget right there. And I can
Yeah,
attest to that.
absolutely.
But speaking of preparing students for the future, because that whole intrinsic motivational aspect and that story you just shared is just, it's very moving and it's very touching because that's the other aspect that we're looking at. We always hear teachers always say like we're supposed to be preparing these students for the future, 21st century skills, and how are we teaching them these soft skills and whatnot. But looking forward, what skills do you believe that students need to thrive in an artificial intelligence enhanced world? And how should schools adjust their approach?
So there's, lots of reports on this that have done all sorts of research, the Future of Jobs report and World Economic Forum, and there's a lot of data out there on what we think kids need. But the Becky Keene answer is I think they need to be problem solvers, clear or successful communicators. I don't know what adjective we want to use. Communicators.
Yeah,
Um, and empathizers, empathetic. So those three things really kind of sit at the top of my list. I believe that kids need to be able to think critically and solve problems, and there's a whole umbrella that comes under that. Um, to be a problem solver, you need to have perseverance. You need to be able to use the tools available to you, right? There's a whole layer there. I think kids need to be communicators. They need to be able to understand how to use language, possibly multiple languages,
yeah,
in a variety of ways. They need to be able to code switch. They need to be able to, you know, write an email to their teacher and also talk to their family members and also, hang out with their friends. And that requires several different vocabularies. And that's valuable and important. And in a world of work, we do the same thing, right? Like we'll have a casual conversation at happy hour that's very different from an office meeting. So having those communication skills and being able to switch when necessary, I think is really important. And then just expanding on empathy, I know that's just kind of a word we throw around, but when we look at the design thinking model,
yeah,
empathizing with the user has been there for ages as
right.
a piece. And when we think about, studying history or studying anthropology or reading literature or even just working with a teammate, like those are all things that require empathy. And when we're in a world of work and a work environment and we're trying to market or sell or balance our books, like all of those things require a level of empathy, of understanding what's happening with people that are not you.
Right.
And so I just think that's an incredibly valuable life skill that applies to almost every industry. I mean, even kids' number one uh, career goal right now tends to be content creator, right? Influencer.
Yes. Yeah.
And the people who are in those positions have a high level of attention to what others think. right? They're
That's true.
paying, or they're running a marketing team. You know, they have a marketing team that's telling them these are the things that resonate with your audience. And that's a form of empathy, of understanding what other people are looking for and what other people need and what other people value. And so again, that's a core skill. Um, and schools have unfortunately been bound by standardization, right? We
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
these tests, we have this curriculum, we all like to complain about it because there's nothing we can do. But the reality is that we are in a position where we value output of facts and figures and knowledge more than character and integrity and humanity because we can't assess those things as easily and there's no standard. It's all very subjective. So I get it. But for schools to be able to adjust is really tricky and it's scary. And it
Hmm.
takes leadership in the schools who are willing to preference character and, you know, umbrella skills, what we used to call soft skills. Now we just call them skills.
Right.
We've done away with hard and soft, thank goodness. But who values that and then sees the connection. Like if we're teaching kids to be good problem solvers, they're gonna do okay on the math test. If we're teaching kids to be good empathizers, they're gonna do okay on the literacy assessment. Like those things
Mhm.
are connected.
That's
But it's
true.
really hard, it's really risky to shift that focus when your funding is tied to your test scores.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those here in California we have what's called the LCAP goals.
Hmm.
Other states have district improvement plans, and those are the things that at times are very difficult to quantify and
Hmm.
to be able to showcase. But I agree with that, and I agree that we need to move forward with all of those attributes for students. And I wanted to get your take on this, and that is, what about the level of teaching students patience? Because as you're talking about content creators and influencers, at times these students, we live in a world where content is out within 5 minutes. And my wife, being a lawyer, one of her law classes that she was telling me about when they were talking about media privacy and media rights was like, it's no longer anymore about are the facts and the story true. It's like, who was the first one out there with the story? Because that's going to
Yeah.
be the person that gets paid the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is your take as far as like, because AI right now, and even with the way a lot of these initiatives are happening globally and even within our country of being like the superpower of leading the world in AI, are there any of these attributes that you like to elaborate on that would possibly support and allow us to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, like this is what we really need?
Well, we would have to unify 8 billion people around the concept of not being a consumer focused world,
Right.
right? So, you know, we would have to value truth over clickbait. We would have to value connection over emotion. We were like,
Yeah.
we would
Good.
really like universally have to adjust because there's an entire economic model based around our innate reaction
Yeah.
where right where we click on stuff, we get emotional, we get invested, there's all these algorithms running, and so it's our fault, you know, as humans that this has happened. If we look at, you know, things like weapons of mass destruction, it really digs into we've done this by allowing this economy to happen where it is more valuable to put out something inflammatory than something true. So we kind of would have to unify as a world and commit to we're not going to go there anymore. Like
Yeah.
we're just not. We're not going to click on the thing. We're not going to react. We're not going to share. We're not going to bait. We're just going to let it go and
Yeah.
like focus on connection and what we really think has value. And so
No.
that not to be that's like a really negative thing to say, I feel like, but the reality, my pragmatism says
Yeah.
yeah, it's a much bigger deal than like, we're going to teach our kids. Well, guess what? That starts with literally all of us committing to not following that same pathway.
100%.
I
And
will add, though, I
yes,
will
please.
add, just as a call to action, you mentioned about the creators and influencers. The channels that are transparent, I think, are really serving our younger generation, where they come out and say, this video took 30 hours of editing to make,
Hmm.
and I have a team of 4 people working full time to put out one 5-minute video every day. Like, the people who are showing that behind the scenes, show
Yes.
even showing their editing, for still imagery, like, oh, this is what we had to do to get this shot, where we're like hanging off the side of something and we've got a lighting mat over here and then we edited it 6 times. Like, I think that's actually really helpful, because we're allowing kids to see that it's not just fast track. I had a fun idea, I went viral, and look, I'm making millions on, TikTok. Like, that's not the path.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah. So I love it
And
when the channels are transparent like that.
you hit on something that I recently just even noticed, even with just streaming services like Disney Plus and Netflix and Hulu, with a lot of these shows that we enjoy watching, what's also being released right after like the finale of these shows is, hey, if you enjoyed this, check out the behind the scenes of what it took to put this show together.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's been around, but like now looking at behind the scenes, it's like, oh, let's look at the content. Let's look at what it took for this. And kind of jumping back into the topic of AI, it shows the power of teaching students even the importance of computer coding, computer literacy skills, and showing them like how to create your own chatbot and why did you create your chatbot that way? Why did you have it select with that prompt and not other prompts? And kind of showing them how technology has also evolved and being able to give them an opportunity. Like, let's look at the behind the scenes of what this looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
So let's talk about teachers and then we'll finish off here. But for educators that are hesitant about utilizing artificial intelligence, what is one simple, actionable step they can take after listening to this podcast to start exploring AI with confidence? And I know I don't know if you will say it or not, but I will say it. I think the first step they can take is get a hold of a book, AI Optimism. All right. There are a lot of prompts, there's a lot of examples. There is a lot of, and you can dive into that, please, but there are a lot of examples of how to use it on different facets and different subjects and research behind it, especially connected to the SAMR model. But what can teachers do as actionable first steps to start exploring with AI?
Well, it was going to feel very self promotional to say get the book. So I'm glad you said it, because I was like, well, there's like 100 strategies in the book. I don't know, there's like 112. I don't know. So yes. But also, I've been leading adult professional development for over 20 years. And the thing I always say is to focus on incremental innovation. Disruptive innovation is uncomfortable and difficult, and it's not sticky, and meaning it doesn't last, right? Like, we just blow stuff up and then we tend to walk away later. So incremental innovation is key, and teachers can pick. I When I'm an instructional coach, which I have a background, I think, in instructional coaching,
Yeah.
um, for 10 whole years of the school system, where I help teachers do this very thing. And I would tell them, pick one lesson or unit that you don't like that it's just either is boring, or it didn't go well last year, or your kids don't enjoy it, or you have a really good fail rate, meaning like lots of kids don't even
Yeah.
finish because they just hate it. Pick something that you want to solve, like a problem you want to solve. Pick a lesson or a unit, and then just decide how much you want to change it. These are the steps. So pick a unit or lesson, decide how much you're willing to change that still meets your standards and still does what you have to do, check the boxes. And then, now I used to say, like, search the internet, ask a friend. And now I'm like, ask ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, like, ask the tools and describe it. I have this lesson. These are the things I want to do. Give it demographic details about your students. Give it your comfort level. Like, give it all the details as if you were talking to a mentor.
Right.
And then ask it for ideas and ask it to ask you questions. Claude is my favorite model for this. Claude is amazing. I use it every day for something. And Claude does an amazing job of having that dialogue with you, of asking you questions and kind of getting to know you and what you need before it generates some ideas, which I really appreciate. So I know that that's kind of maybe an ironic action item, but the actionable step is like use AI to help you come
Yeah.
up with a way you can use AI. And then bounce it off a teacher that you trust. Be like, hey, I had this idea. What do you think? Do you want to try it with me?
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
No, I love that. That's a great actionable step. And the very fact you said using AI to figure out how to use AI, I'm a big Marvel fan, so there's
A little
those.
bit meta. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was like, you know what? There's a line in there where Thanos says, "I use the stone to destroy the stones," and I was like, wait a
Yeah.
second, like,
Yeah. It's like One Ring to rule them all. We could do so many movie references right now. Yeah.
right, right. But Becky, I really appreciate just your time and just taking. I know it's a busy part of the school year to start off the school year here in the month of August as things are rolling around across your state and across
It
the
off.
country. But thank you again for taking the time just to join us and to talk a little bit about your book and artificial intelligence.
Well, thanks for having me. And I look forward to listening and connecting with your listeners around the world who are tuning in. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you, and I will put a link to where can listeners get a copy of your book. Where's the best way to do it?
So it's currently on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay,
But I'm hoping to make it to Target. My last book ended up at Target, and that would be really fun to happen again. So we'll see, Target, if you're listening.
okay,
But the best way to get in touch with me and even get the resources that go along with the book that are free is at beckykeene.com.
okay.
And you can go to slash books or just use the menu to go to books. And that has the group study guide. There's some downloadables. You can request a virtual author talk, all right there on the website. And then it's linked straight to Amazon and Barnes and Noble as well. So
Awesome. Well, then that's the link that I will put in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, that's the link that you'll have. Just click on that and you'll have access to all the resources that Becky has from AI Optimism. And I want to thank all of our listeners tuning in from wherever you're listening to, or whatever time of the day you're listening as well. But please stay tuned for our future episodes. And hopefully, we'll have Becky back on talking about esports for the next one. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything you want to just get in touch, please also visit garciaedtech.com, or you can also send me an email at cbgarcia@sandiego.edu. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.